This next lesson is focusing on the Plains Indian belief on nature, land, and war. Now, we've already looked at their survival. We've already looked at the structure of their society. But what we need to understand now is, what did they believe in regards to the nature, the land, and the war? This has a real big impact later on as the course goes on, because the more people that move to America, the more problems that occur because of Plains Indians' beliefs in certain things and how they conflicted with the white settlers. So, going back to the syllabus, like we do with these lessons, where are we at the moment? So we've done the social and tribal structures. We are now looking at the second bullet point, beliefs about land, nature, and attitudes to war and property. This will cover that whole second bullet point. Now, the next slide. What did white settlers believe? So we've got a list of things here that white settlers believe in. And what we need to understand is that, why did the Native Americans disagree with this? Now, this is an overview, and then we're going to go through it in a bit more detail. But firstly, we've got that land can be farmed and owned. Buffalo could be slaughtered and their parts could be sold for profit. War was about killing and fighting for as long as possible. Land and money are two of the most important things. Staying in one place and not leaving for a long time, digging up land and trying to find gold, and the key belief in manifest destiny, the idea that all land should be owned and settled on by white Americans. I'm not going to go through the next bit, because I'm going to go through the information first and then come back to this. So while I'm talking through the next lot of information, have a think about why the white settlers and the Native Americans would disagree with each other based on their beliefs. So, what we've got here is the three pieces of information on what the Native Americans, the Plains Indians, believe about nature, land, and war. We'll go through each one, and then we're going to go back and see if we can fill in that table that we just looked at as a form of revision. Then we're going to look at an 8-mark importance question that came up in the first year of the GCSE exam. So first of all, nature. Everything in nature has a spirit. We know that from previous lessons. These spirits would sometimes help humans. So before a buffalo hunt, the Native Americans would do a buffalo dance to connect with the spirit world, and in their opinion and their beliefs, these spirits would help them in the buffalo hunt. Humans were a part of nature and should work with the spirits of nature rather than trying to tame nature to obey them. So humans and spirits should work together, and humans should never try and control the spirits. Native Americans could contact the spirit world through vision requests, guided by spirit animals like hawks or foxes. They dance special ritual dances, like we've already mentioned, the buffalo dance. They also do things like the sun dance, enter the spirit world. And it was possible to work with spirits to charge up magic items, which they would then wear to bring them luck or protection during things like a buffalo hunt. So I think the one word to summarise nature is all about spirituality. Okay. The next thing, land. Land was sacred. Now, those three words are going to be absolutely vital to this course as this course goes on. Land is probably the biggest reason why there was significant conflict between the Native Americans and the white settlers. Some Native American lands were especially sacred, such as the Black Hills of South Dakota. The Lakota Sioux believed their people had been created in this hill by the Great Spirit Wakantanka. So some pieces of land were absolutely invaluable to the Native Americans. The Black Hills of South Dakota were absolutely vital to the Lakota Sioux. Some Plain Indian tribes farmed the land as well as living by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plant resources. In these cases, a farming plot did belong to an individual family, so some Plains Indians did farm. And in that case, they did own land. But most of the beliefs the land was very difficult to farm and no one person was allowed to own land as property. So the majority of the Native Americans' beliefs were that land should not be owned as property. All Plains Indians tribes did have hunting areas that they used together. Sometimes treaties were agreed between tribes to share these hunting areas. So a treaty is an agreement. And what this means is that basically Native American tribes shared hunting ground to make sure that they could survive. But they only really did that when they agreed a treaty between one another. The next point, when food resources were scarce, conflicts occurred as tribes pushed into hunting areas they were traditionally used by others. So there was conflict over land because some tribes pushed into areas that were used by others. That could be overcome by the treaty that we spoke about in the last bullet point. This last one is, again, just as important as the three words at the top: land was sacred. Farming or mining was seen by some Plains Indians as disrespectful to the land. These activities in sacred places would be especially likely to disrupt the link between tribes and their spirits. As this course goes on, one of the most significant wars that we talk about is because white settlers began to mine in the Black Hills of Dakota. So it does cause problems. Land causes a lot of conflict between the Native Americans and the settlers. The last one, war. Survival on the plains was so difficult that Plains Indian tribes raided each other for food, horse, weapons, and people, women to marry, and children to bring up their tribe. They never fought each other to kill one another. They fought each other to gain items, to help them survive. Young men were the most valuable for the tribe, as hunters and protectors. No tribe could afford to lose many. So in terms of war, it's going to add this at the top. War was not an event where death was an option. Native Americans only went to war if vitally necessary. That's really important that you understand that. They're not going to start a war just out of the blue. They want to start a war if they really need items, food items, they need horses, weapons. If they needed something like that, they would have a war. But they wouldn't do it just to go and kill another tribe. A raid would only go ahead if it looked like it would work, and raiders would escape quickly, unlike white American soldiers who were trained not to run away. So Native American soldiers were trained to fight quickly and run away. Only certain brotherhoods would go on a raid because it reduced the losses if a raid failed. And then this one, coup. Coup means success. Counting coup was a special type of fighting where a warrior would attempt to hit or touch an enemy and get away without being injured. Success gained the warrior a lot of respect from the tribe. If you're a white settler, you found this concept strange. Problem is, a lot of white settlers believe that Native Americans were very brutal in warfare when they weren't. They weren't there to kill each other. They were there to gain items. On the odd occasion, yes, Native Americans would scalp one another. But losing your scalp was the worst thing you could do because your spirit couldn't enter the happy hunting ground. So if you just quickly follow, if you finish the following sentences, and then we'll go back to that table we looked at. There's some sentences you can complete. If you just pause the video and using the information we just went through, answer them in as much detail as possible if needed. A few of them are just bog standard, fill in the gaps. You pause it here and we'll move on. Right, so going back to the table we looked at before we look at a GCSE question. Land could be farmed and owned. Why did Native Americans disagree with this? You could say they believe the land was sacred. Some areas more than others could not own land as the land was a spirit and a part of nature. That's one thing you could say about why they would disagree. Again, you could add more, but we're just going through this in little chunks. Buffalo could be slaughtered and their parts could be sold for profit. The Native Americans, key word from last lesson, had a reverence for the buffalo. Only killed what they needed. And they buried the heart. If the white settlers are slaughtering, the Native Americans lose their spiritual connection with the buffalo because their heart is not being buried by the white settlers. War was about killing and fighting for as long as possible, when Native Americans believed that you get away as quickly as possible, while also only fighting for resources rather than death. Land and money are two of the most important things. Spirituality is more important. Working with your tribe, being together and connected with the Great Spirit. Wakantanka. Okay. Money is not important to the Native Americans. Land is only important in a spiritual aspect. Staying in one place and not leaving for a long time. Well, Native Americans would disagree with the white settlers' viewpoint here because they were nomadic, moving around for the resources. Digging up land and trying to find gold. Why would Native Americans disagree with that? They see it as the biggest act of disrespect by digging up land. And then key belief in manifest destiny, the idea that all land should be owned and settled on by white Americans. Now, the key thing here, this idea is central to the white settlers' belief. If manifest destiny is going to be completed, then Native Americans' lives need to change. Native Americans won't want to compromise their history to allow white settlers to take over. This is the key thing, why white settlers and Native Americans disagree. Now, this exam question here was the first year of the GCSE paper. Explain the importance of the Plains Indians' beliefs about land and nature for relations between Plains Indians and settlers. So basically, what this question is asking is, why did the Native Americans' beliefs cause problems with the settlers, but only, and this is a mistake a lot of people made in this paper, only about land and nature, not about war. So I've got for you is an example of an 8 out of 8 response. And I'm just going to read through it so you have an understanding. Remember, you can either do 3 peel paragraphs or 2 peel paragraphs. This person hasn't done that, but it's still got 8 out of 8. So as I say, there is ways around it if you feel confident in certain aspects. But it says, Plains Indians believed nature was extremely important as mother of the land. Also, they believed everything had a soul, and when they killed buffalo, they would leave the buffalo's heart as a sign that the herd would survive and continue to grow. As well as this, Indians did not farm the land as they believed that would disrupt nature. What you've got here is the candidate just talking about the Indians' beliefs. They are not talking about importance yet and how it conflicts with the settlers. However, their beliefs completely contrasted with the act of white settlers. White settlers would farm the land as a way to survive through eating what they grew or selling to make a profit. They saw the land as wealth and a way to thrive and live. Again, they're not linking together as effectively as they should at this stage. Okay. As a result, relations between white settlers and Plains Indians was extremely strained. This is where they start linking the two together. And virtually non-existent. The Plains Indians were horrified to see settlers dig up the land. They believed it disturbed the peacefulness of nature, therefore it led to disagreements and conflict. The reason this was so effective as an answer is because it gave the ideas of the Native Americans and the settlers, and then it gave the linking, the comparison. I would like to see it done throughout a bit more if it's going to be a more effective answer. This was the first year. I'm not sure if this would get 8 out of 8 in future exams, because it doesn't have that clear structure, but it does exactly what is needed. It's got secure knowledge of both sides and an understanding of how it caused conflict and had an impact on the relationship between Indians and settlers. So let's just go back. We've looked at the Indian beliefs in nature, land and war. We've looked how settlers may view the beliefs, and we've looked at an important GCSE question. So this is all you'll need to know, but this is something you'll need to definitely refer to constantly throughout this GCSE unit.